The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Yeah, there's a lot to fix with Michigan State football, but amongst them on the top of the list, recruiting. Can Pat Fitzgerald solve all of our problems?
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans.
How do you parse this whole Pat Fitzgerald hiring for Michigan State? Because on one hand, okay, this guy at Northwestern, he always had his classes ranked somewhere around the 50s. It wasn't a recruiting juggernaut necessarily. And also, well, he's been out of the college coaching game for 3 years. But on the other hand, let's not kid ourselves. Like, Michigan State doesn't have the same limitations, both academic and resource-wise, as Northwestern. You almost understand how he was always in the 50s over there. So, Alan, can Pat Fitzgerald solve the recruiting issues here at Michigan State, or what do you make of this whole hiring for the Spartans?
Yeah, so I think that the recruiting is always a part of a hire, right? And I deal with recruiting entirely.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk a lot about recruiting, but there's more to a coaching hire than just recruiting. And I think Pat Fitzgerald brings some of this. He was an all Big Ten linebacker. He brings understanding of how to win and play in the Big Ten. I really think for him to have gotten Northwestern into some Big Ten championship games and into that discussion with those recruiting classes that you mentioned were not at the top of the conference, that's an accomplishment. And so that's the first part of my answer. But in terms of fixing recruiting, I think that part is going to have to remain to be seen because he hasn't recruited at a program like Michigan State before. Northwestern is kind of its own animal when it comes to the Big Ten. It's like a Stanford or a Vanderbilt or places like that. And at the time, you could see him start to put some of he started to understand that if we want to sustain the success at Northwestern, we're going to have to update the way we recruit. He recruited in a very developmental way, I'm going to find guys that fit what I want to do. Almost in like a early Mark D'Antonio way of I'm going to find guys under the radar. We're going to win with dudes that have this chip on their shoulder. And that brings you a certain level of success. And then I think he started to say, we want to sustain this. If we want to beat Ohio State and they're going to put first round receivers out there, we have to change our recruiting approach. And you can see that happening at Northwestern now. Northwestern, I think, has a pretty good class this year, but the facilities, beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah.
They're putting in a new field, right? That'll be done too. A lot of those wheels were set in motion by Pat Fitzgerald, understanding that he was going to have to do something different in recruiting than what Northwestern had done traditionally. So I think he gets it. And I think he's going to know that he's going to have to bring on a staff that will help him do that at Michigan State. He can't do that alone. And I think you could see some of the pieces of that coming together late in his Northwestern tenure when they started to win some recruiting battles. Peter Skoronsky was a 5-star. Couple other guys, Josh Preeb from Michigan, Caleb Tiernan, who's going to be a high pick. Now those guys were 4-star recruits. So they've won some recruiting battles here and there.
Maybe you could do a better job of explaining just how behind the eight ball Northwestern can be with their academic restrictions, the resources. How hard was it to recruit Northwestern for Pat Fitzgerald? And you could take that two ways. One, even before the NIL era, because certainly it wasn't great shakes back then, but even as the NIL era started to blossom at the end of Pat Fitzgerald's tenure, is it what everyone's making it out to be? It is just so much harder to recruit there, or is that a little overblown in your opinion?
I don't think it's overblown. And I've known people who have worked there in recruiting and assistants who have shared with me some of the frustrations of this place is great. Obviously, if my kids had a chance to go to school here, you'd send them to school there, right? Academically, the campus is beautiful, great location. But in terms of recruiting football players against some of the schools that are in the conference, it's tough when you don't have the same home game type atmosphere. That's why they wanted to update that. You didn't have the same facilities. That's why they needed to update that. Then on top of that, you have academic restriction. It is I don't think that part of it is overblown at all. And
Okay.
so I Northwestern, it's kind of like I mean, they ended up getting things done, but there's no doubt that it's more difficult to recruit and win there than it is at other places.
So with early signing day or just straight up signing day coming up on Wednesday here, what kind of a day is Michigan State going to have? Because that was one of my first thoughts as, hey, all this Pat Fitzgerald motion right after firing Jonathan Smith is just about 72 hours before this day comes around. Now, we have heard from some players here, like you guys reported earlier today, that Cade Kaufman, the 4-star quarterback, he's still locked in for the class. 4-star tight end Joey Caudle, he's still going to be locked in. Tristan Comer made an announcement that he is still in. Wide receiver Zach Washington, still committed, but he's opening up his recruitment to see if anything happens in the next few days. How can you blame the kid? What kind of a day are you expecting for Michigan State? Do you think largely this whole class will stay intact, or is this going to be a class that kind of settles in just like 11, 12, 13 kids? I got to know your answer here, Alan.
Yeah. So the first thing I would tell Michigan State fans is you have to set your expectations fairly low for Wednesday. I mean, this
We have.
Like this HIRES, it's not about right. Wednesday, right? It's about the future. Yeah. But I think you have to take the small victories where you can. Not all these, and some of these victories, I think keeping those guys in the class, those are pretty big victories.
Yeah, I would say.
Some of those guys easily could have opted. I know Joey got some offers recently. Cade, there's been a lot of schools that have kicked the tires on him. So even though maybe that was all happening behind the scenes and not everybody was aware of how much other schools were coming at those kids, keeping those guys in the class, first of all, that's a win. So you should be happy that with a coaching change this close to the early signing period, that you're signing anybody, and these guys aren't all waiting till February. Right. So I think that's a positive sign. And I think that Pat Fitzgerald's cachet has something to do with that. I think Jonathan Smith and his staff deserve a huge bit of credit for saving this class too. They've recruited these guys all through the fall. They were still in contact with Cade. They were hosting guys on official visits yesterday, so
I noticed that. Yeah, that was strange. Yeah. I thought like, oh my God, is this thing going to stay intact? That they reverse course. So I'm glad you
do the job until you're not doing the job, and
credit to them. Yeah.
Huge respect for that. So Wednesday, if you keep most of the class together, I think that's the best expectation. And then from there, you have to see, I think it's the second signing day that's going to be interesting. What's the philosophy?
Sure.
Who's left out there after Wednesday that we can go after? Or do we go more portal for now? And then you really look at the 2027 class. But I would expect them to at least look and see who's left in 26. And I think because this early signing period is even earlier now, normally there would be, I say normally, but for the last couple of years, there would be still a couple of weeks left. Now with it being this early, I think you may see more kids wait to February. Not a ton of them, but more than in other years. And so maybe there'll be a chance for them to pick up, a couple sleepers or some guys who decided to wait.
NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
After a long search, UCLA has finally found their head coach.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins.
The Bruins have finally done it. Pete Nakos has reported, I've seen Bruin Report online also somewhat confirm it as well. UCLA is expecting to hire Bob Chesney, a 48-year-old head coach from James Madison. He just coached his James Madison Dukes to the Sun Belt Championship game, undefeated in conference, 11-1 this year. And for all the talk of UCLA trying to find the Curt Cignetti, whether it was somebody who built his way up in the ranks, somebody who's been a winner at every place, did he have to be arrogant and brash? Did he just have to win at James Madison like Curt Cignetti did? Well, UCLA has gotten a proven winner at every step of the game. Somebody who literally did the same thing as Curt Cignetti and bring James Madison to continued success. Not just drop the ball, but continued success from making the leap up from Holy Cross. And when Bob Chesney was at Holy Cross, he also had success. So from D3, D2, to the FCS, to the FBS, a 2QB system. Everything has been successful for Chesney. And if you want a program builder, this is the guy. Somebody who can bring in energy, but also not trying to be too flashy with no substance. This is the right guy that can come in and just lead to success. Because we've had too many coaches come in here and say, we've got a lot going on, and nothing goes on, other than maybe Jim Mora. Then you had Chip Kelly, who came in here and did nothing in terms of vocal. Then you had Deshaun Foster, who was fumbling through his first couple of words of Big Ten media days and did okay recruiting, but in the end, it really came down burning and crashing down hard. But Bob Chesney comes in here 20-5 in his 2 years at James Madison. They're in the Sun Belt title game. And if the Dukes do make the CFP because of the ACC craziness, Chesney is potentially expected to coach James Madison through the CFP. So there is some good and bad news here. UCLA has got the right guy, considering early signing day is pretty much upon us. UCLA can't exactly rebuild their early signing day class, but maybe they can go back on the later signing day, hit the portal hard. And for what UCLA needs is, are we rooting against James Madison? Because the earlier James Madison loses, then you get Bob Chesney over to UCLA. Either way, you got a young head coach who, as much as has been leaping and growing through the system, I would like to believe this is a guy who can come stay. I've seen from Football Scoop just the other day that UCLA was willing to give him about a $6 to $7 million deal, but it's already been informed that he has informed his players he is going to take the UCLA job. 44-21 at Holy Cross. Holy Cross didn't really win before Chesney was there. 44-16 at Assumption College. All right. This is a guy that at colleges you never even heard of, at levels you've never even watched of college football, has taken dumpster fires and turned them into winners. And while James Madison wasn't exactly in that case when Curt Cignetti left, Cignetti took a lot of good players to Indiana and led them to the CFP. Well, they didn't drop the ball when Chesney came in. They kept succeeding. And with the portal, yes, you can have success 1 year, but you can really drop and tank the next year. Chesney didn't let that happen over the last 2 years. So this is huge for UCLA, considering one, there's the Lane Kiffin fallout. There's a bunch of other coaches. Michigan State literally fired and is basically hiring a coach in the same day. Kentucky's firing a coach, apparently rumored to get Chip Kelly. Who knows? But with everybody making their move, Cal leaning in on an Oregon coordinator, everybody up and down the coast making different coaching switches or flirting with other jobs, UCLA has had their opening the longest alongside Virginia Tech. Well, Virginia Tech swung big with James Franklin. UCLA is, in their mind, swinging big with the right guy. Not for a big name, no substance guy. Not for some, all right, flash in the pan, somebody from the group of five that could be maybe something. Sean Lewis, not saying that he's not successful, might be a year or two away from making the leap from San Diego State. Or a return to glory guy like Dan Mullen trying to work his way back to the ranks. Jason Eck might be a year or two away. But Chesney is the guy that comes in at the right time. He's done enough at the D1 level, both FCS, group of five, to arguably have the best group of five team out there. If you're battling between the two lanes, the James Madisons of the world, if things break his way, James Madison could find themselves in a playoff spot, and that's after their head man just left 2 years ago. That is how good Chesney is. Now, can he bring East Coast recruiting to the West Coast and establish a firm foundation on, hey, we can go national recruiting? UCLA already showcased, before Deshaun Foster was fired, the ability to go into Massachusetts, to go into Florida, find some talent in Texas, because there's plenty over in that region on the eastern side, the middle part of the state, the south, and then just hold serve in recruiting on the West Coast in Southern California, and all of a sudden, UCLA can be a contender in recruiting again. And if you listen to a quote I've seen Bob Chesney put out there about Bob Chesney, when coaches come through, he's like, give me 2 things you liked about our practice, 2 things we need to improve upon. Always tinkering in the right ways, always wanting to improve. And it seems like he's the right He's just the right fit for a UCLA athletic department that could be in shambles, for a coaching search committee that was put in, and all of a sudden, UCLA gets the job done. Now, the interesting question is, who is Chesney going to answer to, right? Is this a guy that's going to answer to Martin Jarmond? Is he going to answer to Julio Frank? Is it like, Martin might be the guy he's talking to for now, but Frank pulled the final string and said yes? These are all intriguing stuff, or intriguing parts, because Bob Myers, who was a part of this coaching search committee on the UC Regents, put together this whole thing of, hey, we need to pay a guy big money. So when Chesney was potentially looking at other spots, as he should, UCLA had a good enough compensation package to bring him to UCLA, which is certainly a lot better than James Madison, even if UCLA lowballed him. But to bring him here and showcase they have the commitment and the wherewithal to bring UCLA football back to prominence wherever they play, they went in the right direction. Absolutely in the right direction. Innovative with what they're doing offensively, continued success regardless of the level, and from what I heard, they wanted a winner. UCLA has their winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. As embarrassing as that 2025 season was, UCLA had their 2 years, let's make it just a blip on the radar, and they finally came through. Think about Michigan State, that same cycle that UCLA had an opening, and they're already changing head coaches because Jonathan Smith didn't work out. Tony White, who was potentially available, might be the scapegoat at Florida State, considering Mike Norvell almost lost his job again at Florida State as the defensive coordinator. He was a guy in. And UCLA weeded through all of it. They let things play out. Didn't get crazy in a Lane Kiffin flirtation or something similar on the West Coast, which would have been Jed Fish, the West Coast equivalent of Lane Kiffin, right? That's what Jed Fish would have represented to UCLA, whether he's trying to get more money at Washington or he thought about leaving to UCLA. Either way, UCLA is putting themselves in the right direction. The right direction, finally. Some good news. The only thing is, if James Madison loses, the sooner it happens, the quicker UCLA can get on the ground running immediately. All right? They can absolutely do this. The real questions are, how much is UCLA going to figure out this NIL situation, considering Bruins for Life was in shambles? Where will UCLA play? How much support are they going to give Chesney to retain assistants, go get new assistants? Those are all fascinating questions. But for now, the expectation, according to Pete Nakos, who got the story first, was that UCLA has their man in Chesney. It's been rumored, it's been building, and now it's all said and done. UCLA is getting their main man. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. Forget the embarrassment. Let's get ready to rock and roll. All right. I'm not talking about any monopoly right now. I'm not going to make some big, crazy quotes. UCLA is just going to be firm, brick by brick by brick. They're just going to foundation all the way up. And I think UCLA is, I'm excited. All right. It's not as exciting as LSU is or as hateful as Ole Miss might be or what Jed Fish could be. It's, this dude's a winner. And he's going to win. Whether it's 5 years, whether it's 10 years, he will bring UCLA in a winning formula that's succeeded at every stop he's had to lead the Bruins into the next level, into the NIL age. Welcome to the Big Ten, just 2 years late. That's where the Bruins will be. Not going to say they're going to go out and do something crazy next year, but there will be sustained success and immediate changes implemented to the Bruins workout regimen, to just their discipline. Everything together will work. That's just my assumption. That's my opinion for UCLA.
NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Sources said that Kalani Sitake had emerged as Penn State's top candidate.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Brian, this Penn State coaching search is crazy. It's bizarre. how did we get to this point? We'll talk about that later. What Penn State's backup options are. Why aren't they going after Brian Hartline? Okay, he should be the lead candidate here. But sources on 3, 24/7, everybody else began to report that Kalani Sitake of BYU had emerged as Penn State's leading candidate. Okay, so this one was kept under wraps. I'll give Penn State and Pat Kraft credit for it, that nobody saw this coming. And this has been in the works for quite some time, it seems. And then BYU caught word of it. The Church of Latter-day Saints and Crumble, a cookie company, the CEO is connected to BYU and helps support BYU athletics. So that's where we are. Sitake is between Penn State and BYU. We'll see how it all unfolds. But Brian, this has just been absolutely insane.
I think this is college football on a yearly basis now. It just happens to be Penn State's turn to get caught in the twister. Like, they jumped out pretty early with the James Franklin firing, but the opportunities quickly dwindled for whatever reason. Everybody's got their own speculation. And now they're the one that's standing and there's no chair left, is what it kind of seems like. So Sitake, maybe Jeff Brom, maybe somebody else, but I did not expect to be having this podcast with you at this juncture.
No, and we just had a conversation, right? This is a follow-up to the previous conversation we had where I sat back and I said, Sitake is a great coach, but he's not a great fit for Penn State. But this is one that, Penn State and Pat Kraft, they seemed all in on. Again, kept it under wraps, that they're trying to work out, okay, how can we best accommodate Sitake? How can we get, the recruiting class? So I see the vision of it. If you're going to get Sitake, if you're going to get some, Ryder Lyons, a 5-star quarterback, right? Is that part of the deal that you're going to bring over that class of 2026? But then again, BYU caught wind of it. And the initial reports were, well, BYU is not going to be able to match it. So Penn State, you got your coach. But then it got past BYU and it got to the boosters, the Church of Latter-day Saints. And so now it's not just Penn State versus BYU in a contract battle. It's now Penn State versus BYU, Crumble Cookies, other mega investors into BYU athletics, and the Church of Latter-day Saints.
It is a very unique love triangle there, isn't it? I mean, it's bizarre, but boosters run companies. So Crumble Cookie, executives, I get that part. That's just ironic that it's a cookie company. It's a nice little sidebar there, but that church has a lot of money. My question for this entire group of people listening to this or watching this, whenever you do, does BYU have the stomach to go back and forth to pay for a coach like this in a public fashion? That's a very conservative institution. I'm sure some of the people there probably don't like this, but again, if it only takes 1 or 2 mega boosters, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But at some point, I wonder when they're going to have enough of it. That would be my question, because Penn State needs a coach. They're probably going to have to overpay at this point because they're the last one standing. So I'm curious to see how far this goes and what the number would be, because BYU's private. They don't have to announce, but if he ends up at Penn State, that would give you an idea what BYU went to. That'd be interesting.
The rumors say that the contract offer is north of $10 million from Penn State, just to kind of give people perspective. I mean, this is a hefty sum of money that we're talking about here. So this isn't Penn State is all in trying to make this happen. Like, this is truly, again, that's why on 3, 24/7, everybody else said Penn State has Sitake has emerged as Penn State's top candidate. So Brian, let's twofold. One, does this actually happen? Does Sitake end up at Penn State? Because it seemed like things were trending that way, and now everything's cooled down and it's dialed back, but it's still kind of a toss-up in people's mind that he could still end up at Penn State, or that BYU did enough to bring him back and retain him, because they've showed the support. Sitake is an alum. Okay, he bleeds BYU. He is BYU through and through. I've said that on every single conversation that I've had to this point. So, and that's why I said also in our previous episode, I need to see it actually happen before I can believe it. So I don't see how he leaves BYU now that he has support, at least comparable support to what Penn State was offering him.
I don't know if it's just money. I wonder if it's the opportunity with the resources, how recruiting works, like getting kids into BYU is hard. Their culture is difficult. Like they literally don't want players to cuss, etc. Like it's hard to get elite players to go there.
But he's also not an outsider of a coach. Like that's part of his.
Oh,
like,
I know.
He is invested in that. Like that's his.
Oh,
Those are all of his tenets. It's not like he's an outsider that's at BYU. No, he has all of those same morals and standards, if you will.
I agree, but he knows that most people do not. When they're recruit 17-year-olds, how many 17-year-olds do you know that play big time football that don't cuss?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like like you can look into it yourself. Like BYU is very stringent. Doesn't always fit. And I know that he understands it makes recruiting much more difficult. So Penn State's a state university. It's a lot easier to get kids into school and they don't have the same religious affiliation. So it's an easier place to win. There's no nice way to say it. It's just way easier. So that's one of the reasons it's amazing what Kalani Sitake has done at BYU. Like they lost their quarterback right before the season. They got a freshman. They go 11-1. The guy can coach. The guy can flat out coach because they're not a great team in my opinion. And I think they'll get bombed by Texas Tech. But just to get to that point, like he should be a national coach of the year candidate. Legitimately. Like he is very, very good.
He is truly doing more with less. Although BYU is starting to catch up again, their recruiting class is very respectable. Again, that's the appeal for Penn State is that you get him on board. You're able to bring Ryder Lyons, some other players along. I imagine they're also committed to BYU for other purposes, right? More than just football. So that is going to be tough. But that's kind of the question here. So let's wrap up this segment before we talk about Jeff Brown, Brian Hartline. Who would Penn State go after if it's not Sitake? Would Sitake even work out? Because I think he's a great coach. I think he can do more with less. So if you give him the Penn State war chest, they'll be able to elevate him, right? But he's never recruited outside of that part of the country. He is, we want to talk about, oh, well, he's BYU through and through. He is Utah through and through. Just about everybody on that roster is from the state of Utah. Just about everybody on that roster is from in that class of 2026 is from Utah. You have some players, some select players. So would he be able to recruit in the East Coast? That's the big concern. And then how quickly, okay, he is an outsider. He is not a Penn State alum. So how quickly are fans going to turn on Sitake if it's 8-4, 8-4, 9-3? Again, same results. And that's kind of what I'm projecting here is somebody that you're doing it for the resources. You're not, are you doing it because you really want to be at Penn State? Or are you doing it because you're getting such a massive investment from the university and then you have no affiliation to Penn State? So I'm just wondering, are you going to get the results quickly enough to appease the fans?
That's a great question. But again, I think he knows that regardless of the resources of BYU, the restrictions in recruiting make that a very difficult task. Mm-hmm. If he takes the right staff, he's probably, everybody thinks they can fix something. You know, the crazy boyfriend, the girlfriend goes back to, I can fix him. That's coaches are that way with players that have problems, etc. He probably thinks he can be the magic elixir that gets Penn State over the top. That's a very common thing. It's human nature.
That's the pitch.
Yeah. But at the same time, the guy's also won at BYU.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to argue with him that he can figure things out. The one way I think it could work beyond, you got to have a quarterback, leave that to the side. If they keep most of the staff and he just brings a handful of his guys from BYU, and I think that's a big question. That might be why it's like some of the guys he wants to bring may not want to go. Mm-hmm. And that could be a stopping point for Sitake himself. But to that end, if you mix the two staffs, and I have no idea which ones it would be, that'd be up for Sitake and his staff to figure out. Maybe that would be the right elixir long term. But like we've talked about already here recently on this pod, Penn State's 2026 class is abysmal because everybody left it pretty much. It's not
because they don't know who the coach is.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
In a few years, they're going to have to figure that out. How would he handle big time recruiting? Can he handle 5 stars? Can he handle the opportunities to go up against guys like Ohio State and Notre Dame and now Virginia Tech, who's allegedly got NIL money for James Frank? I need to see that too, by the way. I need to see that play out. Florida's going to go all in. Tennessee, Georgia. He's recruiting against all these teams for kids in areas that he's not familiar. Mm-hmm. He's going to need a lot of the current staff at Penn State to make that work. And that's plausible. I'd be fascinated to see how the staff would work out at Penn State if Kalani Sitake did take that job in Happy Valley, because without a bunch of them, this is not going to work recruiting wise.